Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Welcome back to Grief is the New Normal, where we say things people don't want to say about grief. And today, we're talking about anger, that sharp, messy, explosive, and oh so taboo emotion that nobody wants to touch, especially during February, the month of love. Think about it. Everywhere you look right now, it's heart-shaped everything. Good vibes only, choose love, be grateful, blah, blah, blah. But what happens when grief doesn't feel soft or weepy? What happens when it feels like rage? Like white hot, scream into the void, throw your phone across the room type of anger, because they don't really flush out what that means. That's going to drive me nuts. All right. Because let's be honest, grief and anger are actually besties, maybe frenemies. We'll go with besties for today. And yet no one really talks about it. We have outdated stage-based models that reference anger, and yet we don't really talk about how that anger can ripple and show up through different spaces and seasons as we move through our grief. So that's what we're going to do today, because if you've ever felt that deep simmering, gut-wrenching fury after loss and wondered, is this normal? The answer is hell yes, it is. And today we're going to break down why. When people picture grief, they picture sadness, tears, quiet suffering. And when grief shows up as rage, as bitterness, as resentment, as that seething frustration at how unfair this is, people get uncomfortable. They want you to, quote unquote, move on, quote unquote, let it go, quote unquote, find peace. And honestly, I know I don't really swear on here, but that's bullshit. Anger is a very valid and real grief response. It's just as natural as sadness, just as valid as longing. And yet anger makes people squirm because we're conditioned to believe that anger is bad, destructive, something we need to fix or suppress. We're doing something wrong. And let's be real, anger is just grief with a little more fire in it. It's like spicy grief, right? And the truth, anger exists because love existed first. If we didn't love our people, our person, if we didn't care, we wouldn't rage. We wouldn't be furious about the unfairness of it all. We wouldn't be screaming at the universe, demanding answers, punching walls, or gripping the steering wheel so hard our knuckles turn white, right? So let's talk about the different faces of grief, let's talk about the different faces of grief. Anger, like grief, anger is not one size fits all. Just like grief isn't one size fits all, the way anger shows up is not going to be a one size fits all. It wears a lot of masks, and maybe you recognize one of these in yourself. You can experience rage at the person you lost. How could you leave me? Why didn't you take better care of yourself? Why did you have to make that choice? I know that was something I really struggled with when Garrett died, is that anger at him for the choice that he made. And I really struggled with that when working with my therapist, of owning anger, because I'd grown up thinking that anger was bad or wrong and that I had to be a nice girl. And so I didn't really give myself permission to experience a lot of anger. And so for me, that was super confusing, that I felt a lot of rage at my brother. I didn't feel great and I didn't know what to do with that. You might experience rage at the world. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do some people get long, happy lives while others don't? Like, there's just such a sense of injustice in that anger. There can be rage at the system. Doctors failed, the justice system failed, society failed. I know a lot of us are really struggling with rage at our bigger system in our country right now. There can be rage when there's medical mistakes, when we didn't understand our options, when bad things just happened. Like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel fair. There can be rage at the bigger system. There can be rage at yourself. Woof, who this one touches, right? I should have done more. I should have seen this coming. All of the shoulda, coulda, wouldas that we can get stuck in our heads about what we would have done differently if I had seen that, if I had seen it coming, if I had seen the signs, maybe if I'd paid more attention, maybe if I'd educated myself more about what was going on, maybe if I'd asked different questions or given more of my time. This was something I also struggled with losing Garrett, was rage at myself. Like, I was his big sister. I needed to protect him. And why didn't I see it? Why didn't I do more? So there can be a lot of rage at yourself. And there can also be rage at God or the universe, whatever higher power you believe in or used to believe in. I think that's something a lot of my clients struggle with. Is it okay to be mad at the universe or God or a higher power figure? Is it okay to have those kind of aggressive feelings towards this entity? It can be really confusing and messy and uncomfortable. And all of these different faces of grief are so damn valid. Oh my goodness. And here's where it gets a little trickier, right? What do we do with all of this anger? Because it's one thing to feel it, and it's another thing to carry it day after day, letting it seep into everything that we do. So let's talk about it. First and foremost, stop apologizing for it. Stop apologizing for the fact that you're feeling anger and rage and frustration, bitterness, resentment, all of it. Stop apologizing. If your grief is making you feel angry, that doesn't mean you're broken or stuck. It means you're human, period. And we do not need to apologize for that very human emotion experience. Second, anger is energy. It wants to move. I talk about this with my clients all the time when they're in more of an anger state over like a sadness, depression state. Because when you think about it, as a reminder, I have tiny humans in my home. So we watch the Inside Out movie often. It is a family favorite. They call it the feelings movie. And so when you think about anger, it's red, it's hot, it's fire, it's movement. It feels productive, like you're going in a direction, versus sadness. It can feel blue and cold and slow and not moving, stuck and stagnant. And it can feel better sometimes to be in that anger state because it feels more productive than just sitting feeling stuck in the sad. So we want to feel productive in the anger and the movement, and figuring out that balance of what feels best for those different emotion states is really important. Let's talk about anger and some ways to let it out that won't get you arrested or leave you with broken knuckles. So physical outlets can be really great, whether that's screaming in your car, punching a pillow, going for an aggressive workout, getting your power walk on, throwing ice into your backyard. Your body is carrying this rage. It needs to have a release. We need to find ways to metabolize it out. There's a really great book called Trauma Stewardship, and I read this when I was in my grad program, and one of the things I found so helpful in it was talking about creative strategies to metabolize the feelings that we have out. Because as a clinician, I carry a lot of my clients' emotions. When I'm holding space, I hold their stories. And so I needed to find ways to metabolize that out so it wasn't bleeding into my life at home, so I could have more of that work-life balance. Similar premise with grief anger is we need to find ways to metabolize it out, not because it's bad, but because it's a lot for our body to carry and hold. And so we need to find a release. We need to find ways to move it out of our systems. And now we're going to take a quick pause for a ad for this week's episode. Thanks. Are you ready to explore your grief with a guide crafted by someone who truly understands? Introducing Authentically Unapologetic, a grief journal meticulously designed by Dr. Heather Taylor, licensed psychologist and grief specialist. Dr. Taylor combines years of expertise with personal insights to create a journal that offers more than just blank pages. It offers a path to understanding and healing. Through carefully crafted prompts, reflection questions, and self-discovery exercises, this journal supports your unique journey through loss. Authentically Unapologetic is your companion in honoring your emotions and your person with genuine care and unapologetic authenticity. Available now on Amazon or at www.griefisthenewnormal.com. Start your journey of healing and self-discovery today. Thank you. Creative outlets. Rage Write. This is one of my favorite go-tos for some of my clients is you have your designated Rage Write journal. You set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes and you just let all of the angry thoughts out. And if they stop, just keep writing. That kinesthetic process of writing it out, even if you're just writing blah fucking blah over and over until the thoughts and the anger starts up again, it's super helpful in reducing the noise in your head. So after the timer goes off, you close it and then go do a mindfulness activity. Go shower and wash it off, lay on the floor and do some breathing, put an ice pack on the back of your neck, something to help wrap yourself back up after you've gotten some of those ragey thoughts out. You can paint in angry strokes. I think that can be really helpful. Again, turning your anger into something tangible, those touchstone pieces, those transition objects, they can be really helpful. Verbal outlets. Have a quote unquote no filter vent session with someone you trust who won't judge, someone who won't try to fix what's happening within you, someone who's just going to listen, whether they knew your person or they understand what it's like to just need an outlet in a safe space that's not going to judge or try to fix or rescue you from these sticky, tricky emotions. I think that can be really helpful. And then last suggestion is probably channel it into action. So if your anger is tied to injustice, find ways to channel into something meaningful, whether that's advocacy, activism, financial support, or finding ways to reclaim your power in small, tangible ways. Because here's what I know. Anger, when left to fester, can burn us from the inside out. Anger that's channeled, it can be transformative. It can remind us of our strength, our love, our ability to demand something better for ourselves and for the world. There's a lot of loss that can happen in very unjust, unfair ways. It's this thing that happened that we didn't choose, right? It's a loss that we're experiencing and we had no say in it. We didn't ask for it. We did not pick this path for ourselves. It's something that has happened and has a direct impact on us. And that can feel so out of our control. To find ways to reclaim that power for yourself, that sense of not control, because I don't know, I think as someone who has experienced grief, the more I do this work, the less control I feel like I have. I have one of those little things that I can control versus things that I cannot control on my wall. And, the things I can control or can focus on are like my attitude, my boundaries, how I express myself, things like that. And the things I cannot control feel like they keep growing the more that I do this work, the realizing how little control I have in my day to day. And we can drown in that, like that feeling of powerlessness, helplessness, stuckness, that we keep experiencing these losses, whether it's a physical death, a relationship change, a job change, a lifestyle change, a societal change. And it can leave us feeling really at a loss of what to do, where to start, how to navigate all of the complexities of this. And I think reminding ourselves that there are small things that I can do to help carry my grief in a different way. Again, grief isn't going to go away. It's just going to get different. We talk about that all the time. And finding creative ways to move through the different emotion states that come up, because we're going to cycle through different feelings in grief over and over again. It's not a linear stage. It's like a tornado and they're just cycling over and over again. And new emotions might show up that we weren't expecting. And so having some strategies to help you metabolize those out of your body, I think is important. Because when we're able to metabolize some of that acuity out, the intensity of some of those feelings, it makes space for softening, for more positive memories. And even if it was a complicated relationship with the person who died, maybe it's more positive thoughts about yourself and what you did or were able to grow through. Because I think if we let anger hold too much, have too much power in our day-to-day functioning, it does keep us stuck. It does infiltrate other relationships in areas that we're maybe not wanting it to. I think being intentional about how we address our anger is essential in navigating our grief. So here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. Anger is not the enemy. I'm going to say it again. Anger is not the enemy. It is a part of grief. It's natural, human, completely valid part of this very messy process. And you don't need to hide it, shrink it, or shove it down because it makes other people uncomfortable. It gets to come out and show up. I think I've shared this before. When my brother died, I decided to train for a marathon. I didn't really know what to do with all the complicated feelings I was having. And I didn't ever actually make it to the marathon. My knee busted out around 12 miles, which is fine. And I think having such a physical outlet for my grief was really helpful because I could see how I could get stuck in the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, in the anger at myself, because that felt very easy to access, that anger towards myself. And it took a long time to acknowledge that I had anger towards him. Again, because I grew up thinking that anger was a bad emotion and that I shouldn't feel it. So a lot of growth from that starting point. I just really want to help normalize and validate. It's okay for you to feel angry. You don't need to protect others from that anger experience. You get to feel every part of your grief, including the fire, including the rage, and you get to decide how to let it move through you. So if this episode spoke to you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear that their anger is valid. And if you want to keep this conversation going, come find me. I want to hear how this lands for you. Because here's the truth, friends, grief is the new normal. And sometimes that grief looks a hell of a lot like anger. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next time. Remember to be kind to yourselves today. Take care.
That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.